What's the sound of Russia's oil export strategy sinking? It arrived in the Black Sea on November 28, 2025, when Ukrainian Sea Baby naval drones, the same weapons that have been terrorizing Russian warships for months, found new targets. Two massive oil tankers en route to load sanctioned Russian crude. The explosions were so violent that crews abandoned ship. Fires raged for hours, and both vessels were rendered effectively useless. 4 days later, Ukraine struck again, hitting a third tanker. These weren't Russian Navy vessels. They were commercial oil tankers, part of Putin's shadow fleet of aging ships with dubious registrations designed to evade Western sanctions and keep Russian oil flowing to global markets. The attacks represent a dramatic escalation. Ukraine isn't just sinking military targets anymore. They're systematically destroying the commercial infrastructure Russia depends on to fund its war machine through oil exports worth billions annually. The economic impact? Immediate and severe. Two tankers worth approximately $35 million each, destroyed or critically damaged. Approximately $70 million in lost oil cargo that will never reach buyers. Operations at Novorossiysk's Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal, handling roughly 5% of all maritime oil globally, disrupted by vessels too scared to enter Russian waters. And the chilling message to every ship captain considering hauling Russian oil: Ukrainian drones can reach you anywhere in the Black Sea, and they will. The Shadow Fleet, Putin's sanctions evading oil empire. Before we talk about ships exploding and burning in the Black Sea, we need to understand what Putin's shadow fleet actually is, because it's one of the most audacious sanctions evasion schemes in modern history. When Western nations imposed sanctions on Russian oil following the 2022 invasion, they assumed it would cripple Russia's economy by cutting off its primary revenue source. The problem: oil is fungible, demand is global, and Russia is one of the world's largest producers. Putin's response was to assemble a ghost fleet of aging tankers, many past their operational lifespans, registered in countries with lax oversight, insured through opaque arrangements, and operated by shell companies with ownership structures designed to obscure Russian government connections. The Kairos and Virat fit this profile perfectly. Both flying Gambian flags, a tiny West African nation with virtually no maritime tradition. Both on Western sanctions lists for carrying Russian oil. Both continuing operations despite being designated as vessels facilitating sanctions evasion. These ships exist in legal gray zones, technically commercial vessels entitled to freedom of navigation, but practically serving as critical infrastructure for Russia's war economy. The economics are straightforward. Russia produces approximately 10 million barrels of oil daily. Even with sanctions supposedly limiting exports, Russia continues selling millions of barrels through this shadow fleet to buyers, primarily China and India, willing to purchase discounted crude. Every tanker that successfully loads and delivers Russian oil generates tens of millions of dollars that fund Putin's war machine. Ukraine's calculation was equally straightforward. Destroy the tankers, and you cut off the money funding the missiles, drones, and artillery shells killing Ukrainian civilians. Attack the shadow fleet, and you hit Russia's economy where it actually hurts, far more than any frontline victory possibly could. November 28, 2025, when drones became economic weapons. The Kairos, a massive 274-meter tanker capable of carrying approximately 80,000 tons of crude oil, was steaming toward Novorossiysk when Ukrainian Sea Baby drones found it approximately 28 nautical miles off the Turkish coast. The attack occurred in Turkey's exclusive economic zone, international waters where commercial shipping should theoretically be safe. The drones, each carrying hundreds of kilograms of explosives, struck with devastating precision. The explosions were catastrophic. Video released by Ukraine's security service shows massive fireballs erupting from the tanker's hull, flames shooting dozens of meters into the air. The crew evacuated immediately, not because regulations required it, but because the ship was literally exploding beneath them. Fires raged across the deck and superstructure. The Kairos, worth approximately $35 million, was effectively destroyed as an operational vessel. Simultaneously, or within hours, reports vary, the Virat suffered similar attacks. Another Gambian flag tanker, built in 2018 and therefore relatively modern by Shadow Fleet standards, was hit by Sea Baby drones in the same general area. Fires erupted, crew evacuated. Another tens of millions of dollars in ship and cargo destroyed or lost. The Turkish Transport Ministry confirmed the attacks occurred in their EEZ, approximately 28 to 35 nautical miles off the coast. Turkey found itself in an awkward position. Attacks occurred in waters where Turkey has economic rights, but not full sovereignty, targeting vessels that were violating Western sanctions, but technically entitled to freedom of navigation. Turkey's response was essentially, "We see what happened, and we're not getting involved." 4 days later, December 2nd, Ukraine struck again. The Mid-Volga II, another Shadow Fleet tanker, was hit by naval drones in what appears to be a systematic campaign against Russia's oil export infrastructure. 2 crew members were injured, though damage was less severe than the November 28th strikes. The message was clear. The November attacks weren't one-time events. This is a sustained campaign. The Sea Baby, Ukraine's ship-killing drone revolution. Let's talk about the weapon that's making this possible, because the Sea Baby naval drone represents a revolutionary capability that's changing naval warfare in real time. The Sea Baby is an unmanned surface vessel, USV, that looks deceptively simple. Basically a small boat loaded with explosives and controlled remotely. What makes it revolutionary is the combination of capabilities. 1,500-kilometer range that puts essentially the entire Black Sea within striking distance. Autonomous navigation using GPS and possibly AI-assisted systems. The ability to operate in rough seas and evade detection. And a warhead large enough to inflict catastrophic damage on vessels weighing tens of thousands of tons. Ukraine has used Sea Baby drones to devastating effect against Russian warships, most famously damaging the Kerch Bridge and sinking or severely damaging multiple naval vessels. But targeting commercial tankers represents a strategic escalation. Ukraine is now explicitly attacking Russia's economic infrastructure, not just military targets. The technical challenges of these attacks are substantial. Finding specific tankers in open ocean requires satellite reconnaissance, signals intelligence tracking automatic identification systems, which can be turned off, and potentially human intelligence about ship movements. Launching drones with sufficient range to reach targets 200+ kilometers from Ukrainian-controlled coast requires sophisticated logistics. Guiding them to intercept moving vessels in open water demands real-time targeting updates and autonomous navigation capabilities. And Ukraine is doing all of this while fighting a defensive war against a numerically superior adversary. The operational sophistication is staggering. The economic earthquake, why this matters beyond 2 ships destroying 2 oil tankers, might not sound like a war-winning strategy. But the ripple effects extend far beyond the immediate losses. First, the direct costs, each tanker worth $35 million. Both likely fully insured, meaning Russian-linked entities face massive claims from insurers who probably won't pay given sanctions violations. Each capable of carrying 80,000+ tons of crude oil worth approximately $6 to $7 million at current prices. Total immediate loss, approximately 70 to 80 million in ships and cargo. Second, the operational disruption. These attacks occurred just as vessels were approaching Novorossiysk to load oil at the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal. The terminal handles approximately 1.5 million barrels per day, roughly 5% of global maritime oil trade. After the attacks, other tanker captains suddenly became very reluctant to enter the area. Ships waiting offshore, operations delayed, buyers nervous about whether their contracted oil would actually be delivered. Third, the insurance crisis. Shadow fleet vessels already operate in murky insurance arrangements. After Ukraine demonstrated they can and will strike these tankers anywhere in the Black Sea, what insurance company will cover them? Without legitimate insurance, ships can't enter most international ports. The shadow fleet becomes even more shadowy, forced into ever more dubious arrangements with ever higher operational costs. Fourth, the crew recruitment problem. Sailors don't typically sign up to work on ships that might explode. After watching the Kairos and Virat burn, how many experienced maritime professionals will agree to crew shadow fleet tankers? Reduced crew quality means increased accident risk, which creates yet another operational cost for Russia's oil exports. And fifth, the strategic message to buyers. China and India purchase Russian oil at discounted prices specifically because it's cheap. But if tankers start getting destroyed en route, if insurance costs skyrocket, if operational risks multiply, suddenly that discount doesn't look so attractive. Buyers might decide that purchasing oil from non-sanctioned producers, even at higher prices, is less risky than dealing with an increasingly dangerous Russian supply chain. The legal gray zone, war crimes, or legitimate targets. Attacking commercial vessels traditionally raises serious questions under international maritime law and laws of armed conflict. Civilian ships are generally protected from attack unless they're being used for military purposes. Russia immediately accused Ukraine of terrorism and war crimes. Ukraine's position is more nuanced. These aren't innocent commercial vessels. They're sanctioned by the US, EU, and UK for facilitating sanctions evasion and directly funding Russia's war effort. The oil they carry generates revenue that purchases missiles, drones, and artillery shells used against Ukrainian civilians. Attacking economic infrastructure that directly supports an adversary's war-making capability is a legitimate act of war under international law. The legal arguments will be debated by scholars for years. But operationally, Ukraine has made a calculation. The economic damage to Russia's war effort justifies the risk of international criticism. And notably, Western nations that impose the sanctions these tankers are violating haven't rushed to condemn Ukraine's attacks. The verdict: when commerce becomes warfare. November 28th and December 2nd, 2025, marked a turning point in the Black Sea War. Ukraine stopped treating Russia's oil export infrastructure as off-limits and started treating it as the legitimate military target it actually is. 2 tankers worth $70 million destroyed or critically damaged. Operations at one of Russia's primary oil terminals disrupted. Insurance markets panicking. Ship captains refusing assignments. This wasn't traditional naval warfare. This was economic warfare executed with precision strike capabilities that didn't exist a decade ago. Sea Baby drones, Ukraine's homegrown weapons innovation, proved they can hit not just warships, but the commercial vessels keeping Russia's war economy afloat. The Shadow Fleet was supposed to make Russia sanction-proof. Instead, it became another target, expensive, vulnerable, and increasingly difficult to operate as Ukrainian drones prowl the Black Sea looking for their next victim. If this analysis of Ukraine's naval drone campaign against Russia's oil infrastructure opened your eyes to economic warfare tactics, smash that like button and subscribe for more coverage of the unconventional strategies reshaping modern conflict. Drop a comment. Should Ukraine target more commercial vessels supporting Russia's war economy? Let's discuss.